Okay, we can start.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session for the Tinkerpreneur Bootcamp. Today's session in specific will focus on building tech products with a impact focus, or if you're a not-for-profit organization, or if you want to set up a not-for-profit organization, how do you think about building tech products? To walk you through this, their learning and their journey on building tech products for not-for-profit organizations, we have Ankita and Kishore with us. They work with a company called Rocket Learning, whose aim is to make early childhood learning accessible to students across all socioeconomic backgrounds. They have a very interesting model of providing intervention by involving parents. And I'll let them talk to you more about how they have built their product, how they took it from, the 0 to 1 journey, and how they think about social impact and using tech for that. So, with that, Kishore, Ankita, welcome to today's session. And I'd like you to take over and walk all of us through your journey and what you've learned over the years. And for the students who are watching in, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Towards the end of the session, I'll be asking Ankita and Kishore all the questions that you leave so that if there's anything that we've missed, you get to get that covered as well. So, yeah, with that, over to both of you.
Thanks a lot, Varya. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be part of this session today. We'd love to take you through our journey at Rocket Learning as a tech for good startup. So, just to get started, we'll quickly introduce ourselves. So, I think that there's several different career paths that you can take to land up in an intersection of uh, tech and social impact. So I think what I did was I studied economics at SRCC and then went into consulting, management consulting at McKinsey. So did a lot, learned a lot about data analytics and critical thinking over there. And then I moved over to Rocket Learning to lead their product because I think the idea of doing something at the intersection of tech and social impact was very exciting to me because it was both innovative and I've always had I would say, a soft spot for being in the impact space. And I'll hand over to Kishore for his introduction.
Hello friends, I'm Kishore. I'm an engineering graduate. So I have worked as a professor for 6 years, teaching the electronics and telecommunication to the childrens. Then I have worked with the Institute of Satellite Telecom as a trainer and program manager, where I used to teach how to install satellite antennas and all. So during this journey, I always interested to contribute myself in the foundational learning. That's why I moved to Rocket Learning. So now working as a program lead. So mostly largely looking after the operations at the state. I used to meet different people, childrens, teachers, to just understand how we are doing with them, how our product is related to them, how they are receiving our content and all. So yeah, this is about me.
Thank you, Kishore. So we'll just dive right in to what this whole session is going to be about, and the focus is going to be building impact first companies. So when you hear of tech or tech apps or tech products, I guess you think of the most common ones, right? There's WhatsApp, there's YouTube, there's Swiggy and Zomato, and they provide a lot of these services to millions of users. So you think of it being sophisticated technology that also provides something at scale. And the scale element is where tech becomes a very interesting and huge lever for social impact. When you think of social impact, many of you may not associate it necessarily with technology, right? You might think of philanthropy, or you might think of charities, or providing one-to-one education, right, where people volunteer their time to teach classes. So there's many different versions of social impact, but the one version we want to talk about today is using technology to create social impact at a large scale. So where the key difference is your end user. So in a traditional tech app, which say you and I use or anyone else uses, like say a Swiggy, your end user is generally a user who can pay for their service and is a user who is from a more high income family, right? Whereas you have millions of people in India who live below the poverty line, right? And just with COVID, about 230 million more people have slid under the poverty line. So you have a huge user base, which we essentially tag as underserved communities because they need the services, but they can't always pay for their services, right? So you here have a combination. You here have a combination of tech and social impact, and we use these two principles to build a company like Rocket Learning, which can provide a service to your end user without asking them to pay. And the interesting thing for people to know is that the way you have venture capital or financing and funding for profit companies, you also have financing for not for profit companies. So there are traditional routes like say donations, or then you move on to grants, and you also have a set of companies called impact venture capitalists, right? And they prioritize not how much revenue you're bringing in, but how many people you're impacting and how well you're impacting them. So we'll take you through our journey today. And so over the last 2 years, we have reached about 800,000 children in the 3 to 8 year old age bracket. And this is across about 50 to 70,000 parent communities. And this is the journey we'd like to take you through today. So the most important thing when you think of tech, right? I mean, there are so many catchphrases that are used these days. So you hear a lot about Web3 or blockchain or the metaverse, and or you personally might say that okay, I want to build an app because apps are the cool thing to do. But the most important thing to think of as an entrepreneur, any type of an entrepreneur, is what does your user want, right? The end person you're building this product for, are they going to be able to access the metaverse? Someone with a geo phone, right, which is like millions of people in India, maybe not. So the trick to sort of building something that works is to really define what works best for your end user, which is what we prioritize a lot at Rocket Learning. So to take you a little bit through our journey over the last 2 years, we started off in June 2020, and the key was starting off with a few hundred parents because the idea was never tested, right? So we started with something you might have heard this in your other sessions, right? A minimal viable product, which is essentially the the most minimum number of features of your product that you need to get started. And getting started is the key here, right? So you build, so initially we started off with say a few hundred parents, by and here we didn't have a core technology that was operating our product, right? So it was, we used to manually send this out, and if you read up stories of several for-profit startups as well, they often start with manual interventions to test and fine tune the product, before actually building it out to see are users liking it. Do we have to make changes here? Is this not working at all? Do we need to totally scrap this idea? So this initial phase where you're building and testing the most simple version of your product and getting feedback, that was where we were at right at the beginning for a good 3 to 4 months. um, by December 2020, we had reached about 100,000 children. And this was a lot through government partnerships, etc. And this was when, after we knew with, our pilot phase that this was working and parents were liking our product, we were confident enough to scale it up, right, to at least 100,000 kids. And at this point of time, we were still fine tuning the product. And now, finally, 2 years down the line, we've reached about 800,000 uh, sort of children. So, purely in terms of building a product, the different phases would be, the first was the pilot phase, right? Where it was a no tech phase, totally just a pilot where we have learning videos. We're sending these out manually on groups. So, a lot of for example, Dunzo also started this way. So, I don't know if you've all heard about Dunzo, but it's essentially is an app which allows you to deliver deliver products between houses, right? It's a like a last mile logistics startup that's based out of Bangalore, which has millions of users right now. They started off in the beginning by having a WhatsApp group where people would place their order and someone would manually take note of that order and get it transported. So, many companies start off in a pilot phase where they don't use tech. The key objective in this phase is to test your idea and see whether it's working or not, whether your user is liking it or not. The second phase for us was where we actually built a tech feature or a set of tech features, and this was also the absolute minimal. So we built out a system for automated sending of content because now we wanted to reach 100,000 users, right? So 6 months down the line, um, we had a full system for automated sending, and we had one flagship feature for gamification, which was this smiley based report card that used to get automatically sent out. At this stage, it was still one gamification feature and the core feature of automated content sending. And finally, by March 2022, we'd built out a whole set of content videos, a full fledged gamification system to support all of the automated sending. So, and in the future, over the next 1 year, we'll build out more sophisticated features like AI and ML to nudge users better and make them come back to the platform. So, this is just to give you a sense of how we didn't start at 800,000 users. We didn't start with a sophisticated technology system that was built over a month. So this was a course over 2 years where we gradually prioritized and built what using tech, what was most important to build. But we started off with no tech to test our idea. So now I'll hand over to Kishore, and we'll go through a series of points, right, that will help you understand why we are building what we're building and how we are building it.
Thanks, Ankita. Uh, Now we'll just discuss the need. The need is very important for any firm. So like if you have a Swiggy, why the Swiggy exists? Because the people don't find enough time to go restaurant every time. That's why they brought restaurant at home. So that's a need, right? So as of now, we know rapid learning is working for children through technology to have a social impact, right? Then what is the need of working for early childhood education? So the first point is the 85% of brain development happens before the age of 8. So we can understand. So if 85% of brain development happens before the age of 8, and rest 50% development happens in the rest of the life, right? So that age group of children 0 to 8, that is very important. So that's why we work for this age group, right? This is the first point. Second point is what during this age group, the children spends most of their time with their parents, right? They observe them, they observe many things around them, they learn from them, right? So that's why the parents engagement in their children's learning is becomes very critical. So this is the second point. And most important third point is about 100 million of children from our country don't have access to this quality education. So like you may have observed that you know that uh, in the rural area or rural part of the country, there are no proper school, there is no formal education system is available, the resources are less. So all these reasons, that's why we exist, we work for early childhood education. So as you know, we have started in June 2020, almost in the pandemic peak of the pandemic. So you can understand that from last 2 years, almost all the schools, preschools, and colleges are closed. And if that 0 to 8 years are that much crucial for children, then if they are away from the education for more than 2 years, so it's almost a loss of 20% of their brain development, right? So we can understand then how much it is important for a children, for a parent, and in a social perspective also. So that's why we work for this age group. So we available them the proper resources for their brain development. So what happens because of this? because if a child gets a proper inputs during these age group 0 to 8 years, if they get a higher brain stimulation during this age group, then it improves their future school, their future possibility of completion of schooling, right? So you may have heard about the school dropouts and all. So it happens in a rural area mostly. The children just leave their learning education in between. So it is just because they have not gone through this ECE process properly. That's why it is impacted their education. So if children get the proper input during this 0 to 8 years, he likely to complete his education. It is directly impact his overall development, his confidence, his social skills, attitude, etc. And it almost obviously some of all these things are impacted in his career, right? So all these points are correlated: brain development, parental engagement, and all these things, right? So now we'll just go through what are the pain points, what are the problems, what are the threats in this journey. So in the high income households, right? So in the mostly you can say in the urban areas. So in the urban areas, the peoples are doing proper different jobs. They are mostly they are educated. They earn good amount of salaries and all. So they know how much the education important for children. So from the beginning itself, they focus on their children's learning. They avail different resources for them, right? It is directly affect the higher brain stimulation of that children, right? So it is normal. It is doing good in high income households, but we work for a low income households because there are few uh, you can say there are few things which we have to build in the low income households. So like awareness. First point is awareness. So in low income household, it is seen that as I work in the field, so I used to meet people. I used to understand their problems. I used to understand uh, what are their needs and all. So so in this surveys, what we have come to know that there is a lack of awareness in the low income households. Like they don't think the early childhood education is that much important for the children. Even I can relate this with my own life also. So I started my schooling from directly grade 1, right? So I don't remember there was any kindergartens, Anganwadis were exist at that time. So why just it is just because of the lack of awareness. So people usually think about the higher education. They just care about their children's education when they enters in class 10 or 12, etc. But they don't care about the early childhood education. Sankita, the slide is not visible. Sorry. So basically, in sorry, I'll switch off my video. Okay. So basically, in rural area of the country or the low income household, there is a lack of awareness of the early childhood education. Second thing is low information. So what it means, they have less access to the different resources and learning materials. So that is another problem in a low income households. Because and third one is a low motivation. So basically, the low income households, they are farmers or workers, etc. So they usually spend their most of the times working for their bread and butter, and they don't find enough time for their children to participate with their learnings, and even they don't know their participation is that much important for their children. That's why all these gaps are becomes very crucial in the low income household. So here rocket learning comes. So you can see in this picture, if there is a no stimulation or a low stimulation of brain at the critical age, then it directly affects the brain development of a children. Yeah. Ankita, over to you.
Thank you, Kishore. So Kishore has highlighted the user need, right? So you just refer to your the end beneficiary or the person who's going to be using your product as the user. So the end user has a need. You have to be addressing a need regardless of what you're building, and you also have to address your user pain points, because there is something like we mentioned, like Kishore mentioned, awareness, information, and motivation that were not existing, right? Which is what was making low income parents less able to be participative in their child's education. Those were pain points that need to be addressed by your solution. So now we come to how we built a product to address this particular need of early childhood education, or ECE, and how we created a product that addressed all of these different user pain points. So, right, so how do you provide high quality and impactful education at a large scale? Because as Kishore mentioned, there are say 100 million plus kids who don't have access to early childhood education. So if this were to be solved by a solution that is slower, it would take decades to solve this problem, right? And so how do we use technology to build a solution at scale so that a significant chunk of these millions of kids can be impacted in a shorter period of time, so that we don't have to wait 10 years, 20 years, 30 years for the entire system to reform before they can get access to a high quality education. So the core idea behind Rocket Learning is that it's a daily learning app that's built over WhatsApp, where with 2-minute learning activities that go out on these classrooms every day. And there are a set of gamified rewards for kids who participate, keeping them motivated in the system. So each class group has it's a WhatsApp class group that has our technology on it. So it has about 20 children, their parents' phone numbers, their real life classroom teacher, and our technology. The teacher here acts as a key motivator and moderator, right? So they get the learning activities. We've reduced the teacher's burden of trying to find different activities for these kids, but the teacher is extremely critical to motivating her class to continue to participate. Um, and these are the three components that go out on these groups. So the first and foremost in the middle is the information part, right? So the framework is the AIM framework that we use. It's called Awareness, Information, and Motivation. And we use this as a guiding framework in building our product out, because we think each of these elements is important if we want our users to use the product once, but also to keep coming back. So that, because one day of learning is not going to do anything for them, right? Ideally, we want them to keep coming back every single day, which is what we call user engagement, to have a continuous learning journey. So the first part is the learning material that we send out. These are in local languages. So one interesting fact is that more than 90 to 95% of all the YouTube content consumed in India is in local languages, because that's what people can understand and enjoy watching, right, in India. So all of our material is in a local language. We can't possibly teach a kid who doesn't know English in English, because they won't understand anything in class. So it's local language, it's context specific. So the objects we use in these videos is something that you can find in any Indian household. So we know that if we ask them to buy a set of blocks, they can't do that. They don't have the money to do that. So instead, you can learn the exact same concepts with very similar efficacy levels using household objects to make patterns and learn colors. Right? So these are very context specific, language specific, 2-minute videos. So TikTok style videos that range anywhere between 15 seconds to 2 minutes, that teach a particular concept and make them do an activity. So that's one huge part of what we do. The second part is building awareness. So we run a bunch of nudges and fun campaigns that they can do with their kids to understand the importance of what they're doing and why it's important to stick to it. But also, I mean, if somebody tells you something, if they give you a message, it may or may not register with you. The part that's most likely to get you to keep coming back is if it's fun and if it's like a game. So a huge part of our product is to build a motivation and incentive system around this so that kids enjoy coming back to this app every day. So, for example, every class gets a report card every Monday. And there's like a little sample of that here, where there's a smiley against their name for every day that they were active. So, this is an automated feature that goes out to say our 850 to 80,000 class WhatsApp groups every Monday, and kids love smileys. So they want to get more smileys, and so they want to do their homework more regularly. Right? So these are the core ways in which we've built out what happens on these class groups every day. We'll just take you through a quick demo so that you get a better sense of what it actually looks like. And just let me know if you can't hear the audio. Rocket Learning has a network of thousands of WhatsApp classrooms connected to our platform. Let's dive into one. It all starts with the teacher adding parents and their children to the Rocket Learning class group on WhatsApp. We kick off with an onboarding video that shows parents how they can actively participate. They register their children with an online enrollment form and are now ready to get started on their learning journey. Parents receive curriculum linked, locally contextualized content on their WhatsApp groups every morning. These are bite sized play based activities, and parents are actively encouraged to respond with photos or videos of their child doing the homework. The ripple effect kicks in, and more parents respond. Children receive an activation medal for the first time they send an activity on their group. And teachers, who are the moderators of our online classroom communities, both motivate and mentor parents and their kids. At a daily level, parents and children are instantly recognized if they've completed the activity of the day. The end of week report card helps parents and teachers monitor the progress of the child during the week. And the group compilation video visually captures their efforts of the week. And finally, at the end of each month, families receive a personalized badge that captures the history of their participation across months. Parents can access our quiz chatbot that serves them fresh quizzes every 2 weeks in an interactive and fun way, getting real time feedback on their answers. If they get an answer wrong, they get a set of recommended video activities helping them to improve concepts real time. So this was a short demo of what our class group actually looks like. And I just wanted to remind everyone that you saw a series of features, right, throughout this entire video. So I just want to remind everyone watching that we started off with purely just content, right? The minimum viable product. What do we need to get started? We need a series of videos, learning videos that kids can do with their parents every day. It would be great to have a report card, it would be great to have certificates, but that's not the priority. The priority is to test the feature, test this entire idea out. So that's how we started, and it's over a period of 2 years we've built out each of these different features as and when it's become a high priority. So that's just one reminder for everyone to know that you can start off simple. um, to get into the different parts of how we make the product work, there are four key elements to it. You have the technology now, you have the learning content, you have the motivation and media elements, and finally, something that we think is we really enjoy having as a social impact company is a very high quality data analytics and tracking system. Right? So we can actually measure what's happening on our groups. So the first part is technology. So you have automated sending of content. We facilitate two-way communication. So it's not just us sending parents a PDF, which they will never read. It's sending them a 1 minute video, which encourages them to send back a response for their class group. There's sending of automated reminders and nudges, certificates, and finally, we'll move on to more advanced technology now that we're 2 years into this product. The second part is learning content. right? It's interactive. It's bite sized. We know that our user does not have unlimited time in the day. They have maybe so their mothers are working and their fathers are working mostly throughout the day. So we know they have maybe roughly 30 to 60 minutes a day. And so we can't make them watch boring, lengthy videos or read very lengthy text, because a lot of them are also illiterate or less literate. So having an audio visual format helps us make make the product more accessible to them, because it's very easily understandable when they watch it. They don't need to read too much. um, then you have motivation and campaigns, right? So you have gamification, you have these rewards and other media campaigns, and finally you have a set of data analytics. So we partner with a lot of governments, right? And what's important for our partners, it's to know how effective this is. So maybe I'm telling you that there are 800,000 parents on our platform, but how many of them are coming back to the platform every month, every week, every day? How many of them are continuing to learn? These are a lot of questions that partners that you will work with might have. They will want to know what's your reach. They will want to know um, what kind of impact you're having on a monthly or a regular basis. And so we track every single metric, because just because you're a social impact company does not mean that you don't measure outcomes. So in a business, it's easy to define what that measurable will be, right? Maybe it's revenue. But if you think of other newer businesses, right? WhatsApp, for example, doesn't charge its users anything. Its end metric is not revenue, its end metric is the number of users who are on the platform and the number of users who are using it every single day. So, similar to that, as a social impact organization, um, knowing and tracking how many people are actually using it and how many of them are effectively using it. Are they sending back simply a text message, or are they actually sending back videos of their kid doing the activity? So, tracking all of these user engagement metrics is very core to us as a tech social impact organization. Um, so finally, that was the solution, right? That was what our product looks like. But there are a few things to keep in mind when you're building and scaling your idea. And I want to walk you through some of those. So, in terms of rocket learning, there are three pillars to us. We're not purely tech, we're not purely social impact, we're a combination of three things. We're enabled by technology, right? Our technology that's built on top of WhatsApp enables us to achieve scale. We don't want to reach these 100 million children over 30 years. We want to try and get to a significant chunk in a shorter period of time. So we use technology for scale. Earlier, you might have one teacher teaching a class of 20 kids, but now you can have one video, just take any YouTube video explaining a concept that's reaching millions of people, right? So technology allows for scale. The second is that it's government backed. So, for the people we are targeting, the government is a very trusted channel. These kids go to government schools or they go to government Anganwadis, so they trust their teacher and they trust the government a lot. So, it was very important to us that we are building with the government. So, we are very closely integrated with government stakeholders at every single level, at a block level, at a district level, at a state level, so that they are updated of how it's working and what kind of impact it's having, because ultimately our parents and children trust their government school teacher as the key authority on education. So it was important for us that they're a part of this solution. And the third is that it's community led. So a lot of our product is based on social communities of parents, right? So you have this group where there are 20 parents and their teacher, and they all have an influence on each other. It's almost like saying that group studying is a group study session might be more effective than maybe more effective than you trying and studying on your own over a long period of time. It's like how you have a community of your classroom, right? Where you discuss ideas or discuss thoughts and share it with each other. Similarly, this is a tech based community where it's very dependent on different users um, engaging with each other on our groups. So it has a huge social element to it. I've touched upon this a little before, but it's very important to define the tech that works for your community. So while our backend might be sophisticated, we've chosen to keep a very simple front end that's built on WhatsApp. That's because it's accessible. So 70% of Indians who have a smartphone use WhatsApp. It's very highly used. I'm sure all of you open WhatsApp every day, maybe 5, 6 times a day. And this statistic holds true for all people in India who use WhatsApp because roughly 90% of them who have WhatsApp look at it every day. And it's very light. So WhatsApp is a very light app. It takes up less storage, and low income users who maybe have one or even two smartphones or a geo phone which has very limited storage, they can't download new apps, which is why we wanted to go with something they already had. So it's very important to keep your user at the heart of whatever you're building, and this is true of all types of startups, right? For profit and not for profit, because if they're not the heart of it, I'm pretty sure if we had sent videos, if we had built a new app, which they have to download on their phones, or if we had sent long texts, long PDFs, nobody would have wanted to engage with it. So you have to keep your user at the heart of it. And these are sort of the four elements that make it a user centric product, right? It's 2 minute videos, audio visual, it's contextualized, it's in local languages, so it's understood, and it's fun because ultimately kids are not going to want to do that. I mean, so many of us didn't want to do homework when we were in school, right? Or do work at home. So it has to be fun. There has to be a way to make it fun for people to, kids particularly, to keep coming back to it. Um, so this is broadly our session. I just want to wrap it up by taking us back to where we started, right? Which is building an impact first company is a combination of using technology for a social impact purpose and underserved community. Um, Scale is what links the two because social impact is a huge space, right? You have um, let's say more than 500 million people close to or under below the poverty line, or even more now post COVID. So it's a huge scale problem, and technology helps you to you can leverage technology to achieve that scale in a shorter period of time. Um, and it's important to know how you measure your success because while revenue may be a key success metric for businesses, revenue, cost, unit economics, there are similar parallels for a social impact company. The first is user engagement, right? It's your reach. How many people are you reaching? And how often are they coming back? That's the most important. So, user engagement is essentially what percentage of your users are coming back to use your product after they have used it once. The second, for us as a social impact organization, is to measure learning outcomes improvement. So you'll be, I was surprised to know that many for profit edtech companies also don't necessarily measure learning outcomes. But given that our key objective is to improve learning outcomes, for us as an organization, it's super important to measure this. So we make sure we are measuring this across different geographies in terms of what impact is our product leading to? Are we in the right direction? Is this actually helping children or not? So you have user engagement, right? That's short term. We measure it all the time. Like how often, how many parents are we actually impacting? Are we impacting their child's learning? And finally, cost is very important even to us, right? So, like any organization might want to optimize for their cost, we want to make sure that we're cost efficient in that we're impacting a large number of children at the lowest possible cost because we're operating at scale. So, our roughly it costs us less than $1 per child that we're impacting across our entire product. So it's important to keep in mind cost efficiency, even as a social sector organization, right? Because we want to provide maximum impact at the minimum possible or minimum achievable cost. So I would say the key takeaways are get started. Don't wait to build a sophisticated product before you know if it works, before you know if it's having any impact, before you're sure that someone will even use it. So get started and pilot your products first. So, for example, Kishore and I have both done this at Rocket over our journey, right? I used to make certificates manually as a part of a large scale experiment we were running. I would make these certificates, and when we ran the experiment, we measured the impact of it, and there was a 40% impact on the number of parents engaging. So we knew we had to build that out as a feature. And so now we have automated certificate sending. But we didn't make the mistake of building the feature first and then realizing that nobody is going to use it. So it's super important to get started. You have to be manual if you need to be. That's not an issue, so that you can prove your so there's a proof of concept that your product should exist. The second is to build for your user, because if you don't build for them, then nobody is actually going to use your product. So they have to be at the heart of whatever you're building. And it's important to focus on the success metrics that you define for yourself. So you can define what metrics are important to track, right? Is it learning outcomes? Is it the number of people you're impacting? Is it the number of people who are engaging after 4 months of launching? You can define the metrics that are important to you, and it's really important to track them and build your entire product around moving those metrics upwards. So these would be the three key takeaways on building tech for social impact. And that brings us to the end of this session. I think we can now open for questions if there are any.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll actually start by asking a question that some student had put right when we had started with the session on what is a MVP. So, I know you explained the definition once, but could you walk them through an example? I think the certificate one, or even WhatsApp, the way Rocket Learning is used, are both interesting examples of MVP. But if you could just add a little bit
Yes.
more detail. And as before you get started, I just wanted to let all students know that if you have questions, please put it in the chat. The next 15-20 minutes, we'll just be taking your questions and helping resolve any questions, queries, doubts that you might have from today's session. So with that, yeah, Ankita, what is an MVP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, MVP, the definition is that it's a minimum viable product. What it means is that what is the minimum that you need to get started? What is the minimum version of a product that a user will be able to use and find some value out of? So for us, we know there's gamification, there's certificates, there's campaigns. But what is the most important need for us? It was learning, right? So the most important need here is to test the hypothesis that a WhatsApp group with learning material, that like 2 minute learning material going out every day, will work. Parents will respond to it. That was our hypothesis. So the only product we needed to test that out was that um, we have learning material for a week or a month, and we send that out every day on these WhatsApp groups. For us, that was a minimum viable product, because that was most important to test out the efficacy of our product. um, Similarly, for it's also, it can be across a spectrum, right? Like you could also say that maybe a minimum viable product for us would have ideally been at least a platform where you can send this out, right? Like a platform where this you can manually choose the content and send it out to particular people. But I would say that honestly, just having the learning material and the WhatsApp groups for us was the minimum viable product. Anything that can test your idea out without the additional bells and whistles. I just want to make a small additional comment here, which is also that eventually people are also moving towards a minimum lovable product, which is a product that your user will use and also really enjoy. So that might be the second stage of this, right? And I think we achieved that when we created the report card, which was this automated smiley based report card. So you had this one thing that kids would really love to come back to as a game, and you had the learning material. So I would say these were our versions of a minimum viable product and a minimum lovable product to test out your hypothesis that it works.
Got it. So the next question is that does Rocket Learning take any money from the students that it works with? And Ankita and Kishore, it'll be nice if you can also, circle back a little to, business models for social impact. I know the focus of today's session is products, but it'll be just good for the students to have a general idea um, on that theme. So you don't need to go too much into
Absolutely.
detail, but just some information will be helpful. And there are quite a few more questions, so I'll come to those, but we can start with this.
Got it. So right now we don't charge our users anything. So for context, our users are, they're farmers, kids of laborers, daily wage workers, and their parents on, say roughly, could be anywhere less than 10,000 rupees a month generally. So we don't charge our users anything. Come, so you might be wondering like how we're running, right? How does this business exist if people are not paying us? um so I can come to how funding works for companies in general. So you have for profit companies that have funders or venture capitalists at a startup stage, right, where they invest money because they have a particular sense of where that business is going. Similarly, in the not for profit space, you also have people who are funding you, and the return they expect can is not always a financial return. So, what they expect in return is this particular thing that I mentioned on impact per dollar, right? So for them, it's very important to know for every dollar they're investing in us, what is the impact we're generating, not the revenue. So if we're reaching 800,000 children on a budget of, let's say, 3 crore, then how much is that per child basically? And so the more cost effective we are, also they it's better for them as well. Right, so this is how funding works. It can be across a range. Then stepping back, you also have a few models. Maybe I can just highlight a couple. Like one would be, let's say, purely donations, right? Like companies that accept donations to run. The second could be grants, where you have these institutional companies like BMGF and the Dell Foundation um, fu- providing grants for particular organizations to run projects. And third, you have impact venture capitalists who believe that the impact per dollar metric is what needs to be targeted, and they will give you the money to run your company as long as you can prove success to them in these terms.
Got it. And I'll also add one more thing that, even a lot of for-profit companies for a while don't make profit. So I saw a few questions on, say, how does Rocket Learning make profit and so on and so forth. So I'd just like to add that a lot of mainstream startups that are designed as for-profit entities, they also don't make money for as long as 10 years till they're able to build out their product to a certain stage, which is why things like funding, institutional grants, and different forms of support exist. I saw a few specific questions on, equity based on debt and so on. So for that, I'll say that it's very subjective. If you have specific questions you would like to discuss, your mentors would be great to do that because all of equity debt based discussions just depend and are very specific to what you're trying to build and how you want to do it and who you're partnering with. So there'll be no general advice for that, but more of what works for you. But with that, I'll come to the next question, which is around partnerships. So, you mentioned you work with a lot of government organizations or governments directly in different states. So, how do you sort of partner with different organizations or governments for your product? Can you like walk students through that journey? And even for scaling, and I think it can sort of connect to the other question that we received was, how do you spread your product? Because you might have your initial 100 parents that you got through, say, your own network, that if 100 parents in your locality, you can reach out to them and get them. But after a point, it can't be just the people you need to reach out to more and more people. So how does scaling your product after you have your MVP ready look like, and what has been Rocket's journey on this?
I'll let Kishore take this one. He
Sure,
looks at a
sure.
lot of our government partnerships. Yeah.
Sure. On partnership, actually, as already discussed, that we work on a scale. So to work on a scale, we should have to use the already existed system, government system. So specifically talking about the Anganwadi system that is already exists throughout the country. So we have a MOUs with the government, state government, district government, etc. So we reach out to them just to inform about our product, how do we work with the different districts and states. So we do a simple non-financial moment of understanding with the district and state level. So their system is already exist. So from state to districts, so there are several Anganwadi teachers, supervisors, CDPOs, the child development officers, and their system is already exist. So it's specifically if we talk about Maharashtra, so there are more than 1,20,000 Anganwadis there in only Maharashtra state. So for the country, if we consider the country, there are almost 14 lakh Anganwadis are operational. So their system is already exists. So what we do is, so we just provide our product to them. So we just improve the things they are already doing in their Anganwadis. So we create their WhatsApp groups. We connect it with our in-house software. We just schedule our content. We just route our content and other products on those WhatsApp groups. Ankit, I think you can explain it better.
Yeah, I'll just add on. I'll also add on to Kishore's point. So, to the part on how we continuously spread it. So Kishore mentioned that we have an MOU the district, with the district or the state, right? So once we built credibility with one district or a few, so we started out in one district in Maharashtra and 5 districts in UP. UP has 75 districts for context, right? We started off at a district level. We proved the success of the product with the government, and based on this success, and as I said, we track all of our metrics, right? So based on this success, we pitch to the future governments after demonstrating that this does work. And so now we're in 5 states and 45 plus districts. In terms of how it actually works on ground, we run a virtual training for teachers. So we onboard, I would call it an onboarding. So we onboard teachers onto our product. We tell them how to use it. We tell them what it's for. And now that we have the teachers buy-in, it's the teacher that creates the WhatsApp group with her children, because nobody has data of parents' phone numbers in India. So the government doesn't have it either. So it's the teacher who will create the group and add parents to the group and add our technology. So at a micro level, this is how we increase, as in this is how we onboard new people onto our platform at a government level first, and then also at a teacher level. I just want to quickly take also one Varya, like 2 points that you mentioned before this question. One is, I think it's a great point you brought up on many for-profit startups also not making a profit for the first sort of 10 years of their existence. There are also many startups that don't charge users a revenue for the first 10 years of their existence, right? Like WhatsApp has not charged anybody. There's no ads on WhatsApp. It's effectively, of course, maybe they're using our data, which is not the best thing. But they haven't charged anybody for their services for a decade or more. And so Instagram started out the same way, right? Facebook started out the same way. Before they even started building ads and monetization, they were just scaling with the number of users and not charging parents. And the second point I want to address is around the equity debt part. As Varya said, it's very personal, but as in it's very specific to your use case. But I want to mention that in terms of impact, VC depends on which firm it is. Like a life, like an Aspada, for example, might have some kind of equity because they also expect a financial return. But firms that don't expect a financial return also don't expect equity. So they're providing you the financing for it. You're not necessarily giving away equity in your organization as a not for profit startup, at least. Yeah, we can move on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is actually a very complex one, and it's a very simple question, which is how do you really build a business or a company? Because in today's session, we actually discussed about building products, right? So how does a product
Yes.
that Rocket Learning make translate into the company or the organization that Rocket Learning is? So it's a very subtle difference, but but it is a difference. And there's a second question which was around this was how do you start from zero, right? Because say if you are, if Ankita and Kishore today you were to start Rocket Learning again all over with the same problem statement, there'll be very specific steps you would do, right? So if today you had this idea and I asked you to, get started, how would you say spend your first 30 days? From the idea to the product to the company. If you can actually give a walkthrough, like a step by step, I think that will put a lot of things in context for the students because the idea is they take this summer to build something like that and they essentially have about 30 to 60 days to do it. So, how would you, if today I asked you to restart Rocket Learning again, attempt it?
Makes sense. I think, let's say, starting right at the beginning, you have to identify what are the maybe 3 to 4 key things you need to get started. And in my mind, that would be, let's just take Rocket Learning as an example, right? What do we need? We need to pilot our product. We need some Anganwadis, so, right? So we need to be able to identify a set of users who will pilot this with. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 200, just to get started. So
Ankita,
one is identifying.
uh, should we generalize this answer? Because I don't think uh, that whoever asked this question, he or she might have want to understand how the business starts. So can we generalize this?
Yeah, yeah, we can generalize it. So the first thing is figure out the need and figure out who your some sample set of users, right? It could be anyone who fits your particular criteria. If it's like an app for mothers, then maybe a community of 50 to 100 mothers, right? Let's say that's your end idea, for example. So figure out who your user is and have a set of them. The second is you start by making uh, you start by either having co-founders who have the specialization that you need or making key hires that you would need to get started. I would say honestly for Rocket Learning, the co-founders were very good at understanding the government system, right? And understanding the government system, and the first person they would have found is our CTO Vishal, right, to join their team of co-founders. So that's what they did. The second important hire would be the content, right? Like the content lead, like one person who understands what learning content to make, because it's the WhatsApp group and the learning content are the most important things to start out. So I think that is how it started, right? With the just the co-founders and maybe one person who knows content really well to be able to generate that. So it would have started off like that as a team of 5 people, and then as it was piloted out, right, the idea was tested out. As and when more and more success was demonstrated, more people were hired to expand the scale. So, how we run it is that so it would have started out with the pilot, the co founders, the learning head, piloting this out. When success was demonstrated, the next step was getting a partnership, right? Because we wanted to operate with the government. So at least figuring out, so let's just say that maybe your partner is not the government. It could be any other organization is that has access to your users, right? It could be, let's say, an NGO. Let's say we're talking about social impact. It could be an NGO or some other organization. So you strike up a partnership with them, and then you tell them that, look, we've demonstrated that this works, and we have the team that is needed to execute this. So we have a partnership, and then based on that partnership, let's say we have one more, and we know that the scale is expanding. That's when we make more hires. So as and when our scale expands, that's the only point at which we hire more and more, as in when the scale and mandate expands. This would be a very rough sense of um, how we built it. But I would say that it would be the people, that's the co founders, and the first key hire that you might need. The second would be the partner that you would need. So, in the beginning, the pilot would be some partner organizations. For us, it was Anganwadis. And the third would be your funding partners. For Rocket Learning, it was initially family and friends, right? And the co-founders pitching in to get started. And once it moved on from a pilot phase to becoming like our first district, that's when more funders, like for example, the Central Square Foundation came on board. So it's the people, it's the user community that you want to target, and your funders. I would say these are the three building blocks of right at the beginning. And and you keep sort of building on that as you grow. Was that a satisfactory answer, or do you think there are
I
any other
think that
elements?
no, I think that makes sense. And like in the, if you look at it from a very simple thing, you start with identifying a problem, you find the solution to the problem, you find an audience or a user group that will sort of fit in, you test it out with them, you try different forms of that solution with that audience, and then you can take it forward. I remember we, during the last boot camp on a similar session, we discussed that during the pandemic, students were having issues sharing notes. So, if you were to build a solution to address this problem, what would you do? You would first look at your classmates and see how do they share notes right now? Why is it not effective? Then you'll find a solution of, okay, how can you make it more effective? Then you'll test out your solution to see if it works or if it doesn't work. Once you figure out it's working, and if you do want to make money from it, then you can start charging them 10 rupees for every time they access notes. Or you can be like, I want to not charge money, I want for it to be a not for profit thing, I'm doing it for the social impact. Then you can find other ways to fund it if you want to scale it. So the idea is to keep it as simple and keep testing and trying. The next set of questions are quick answers. So first is, how many years have you been working on this?
We've been working on this for less than 2 years. I would say it'd be 2 years, 1 month from now. Yeah.
Okay. How many employees do you have?
Right now, we have about 60 employees. When I joined a year ago, we had 30 employees.
And do you work in association with the Anganwadi system, or are you independent?
We work in association with the Anganwadi system. We think it's super important to have their buy in.
Yes. And then the final question, I'll sort of, we're already a little over time, but the final session I think we can conclude with is, if I think of a good product, how can I find whether people will like it or accept it? How will it find its value in the market? And, you know, a supplementary question to this is that how do you sort of look at competition, right? Because I'm sure there might be similar organizations in this space, with some differentiation, of course, but as a company, how do you approach competition and product differentiation?
Got it. I would say I'll take the first question is I'll take the first question. It's very easy. You just have to talk to people. So let's say you have a product idea, right? You have to identify who's the product for, right? In um, how it works is that if you identify a need, you identify a total addressable market, right? What's the total addressable market that has that need, and what characteristics do they have? So for us, it was children, and we knew there was about 100 million children, and so we know these are low income children we want to target. So you first identify who is your user. Let's say you have some other idea, like let's say you have a recipe sharing idea. Your target user would be mothers, right? It would be mothers of a specific kind, maybe, or in a specific age group. So what you do is figure out who your user is, go and talk to 20 to 50 of these users and tell them about your idea. Understand their need, understand their pain points, and um, that's one way to go about it, which is that ask them whether if they had something like this, would they use it, get their answers, get their sense on it. The second option is to identify these users. That's still critical. And test your product out on them. So like Varya said, for example, this note sharing idea, so you've identified that students are the users are students in class 10, right? You make a WhatsApp group, make about 10 WhatsApp groups with, like, choose a particular school or your classmates, right? And make these WhatsApp groups. Get someone to start sharing content on these, if that's the idea, and then take feedback from the people on these groups. Look, see how many people are actually reading the notes, how many are actually responding to it. Do they find the notes not that great, or do they find the idea not that great? If they find the notes could be improved, make a few improvements to the notes and again get feedback. So I would say that's how you first figure out um, who whether your users will like your product or not. It's honestly by talking to them, by getting their feedback on it, or by actually getting them to use it and getting their feedback on it. So I would say that's how you go about doing it. And the second part of that question, I think, was how do you know the size of the need for that product? That would be based on a set of estimations. So you'd have to narrow down from the entire population. You'd have to narrow down your key user characteristics. So let's say there are 1.2 billion people in India, and let's say roughly 500 million for us. I'm just seeing how we do it, right? Roughly say, let's say 500 million are, or to 700 million are below a particular poverty line, and let's say 50% of them have smartphones. So that leaves us with, let's say, 350 million low income people who have smartphones. That would be how I would narrow it down to one level for um, low income users with a smartphone. So you have to identify what are the key characteristics of your segment. If yours is school going kids, right? Let's say there are 300 million kids who go to school in India from first grade to the 12th grade. And of these 300 million, then let's say you want to narrow down to a particular set of grades. Let's say you just want to narrow down to grades 5 to 10. That 300 million becomes, let's say, 150 million, right? And you can keep narrowing down based on different characteristics to understand what's the size, the potential size of the market. And to test out the idea, you actually meet people who meet those characteristics and ask them your questions. um Sorry, that was a little bit of a long answer. I'll move on to the next question. Varya, uh, what was the last question?
The last was on product differentiation, which I think you partly answered as well,
Competitors.
but yeah, it was on product
Yeah,
differentiation.
you're right. So just to build on the last point, I think product differentiation, the key is what is your product doing differently that other products are not doing. For us, we are a bit of a first mover in terms of the scale at which we're operating and the space. There are very few players in India in the pre-K space, right? It's a wide space. It's such an important age group, but nobody is addressing it at a large scale. Most of your players are in the first to 12 standard, right? K-12 segment. So for us, it was a more of a first mover advantage also
Yeah.
because we were one of the first people. That's one way. The second way is if there are already competitors in the market, what are you doing that they're not? So let's say Doubtnut, right? Doubtnut is a very cool for-profit startup which allows you to post your doubts on a group and they send you back your answers, and now they even use AI and ML to do this. So their key differentiator was that um nobody is solving kids doubts on a real time basis, right? There may be many apps that are providing lessons, but nobody is solving the math question doubts that every kid maybe has. So it would be identifying what are you doing very differently from the rest of the people in this space if there are other competitors.
Makes sense. Thank you, Ankita. Thank you, Kishore, so much for doing today's session and taking some extra time and answering all the questions that the students had. I'm sure they can come back and watch and rewatch this session as they build their product, because my sense is, like you mentioned, iteration will be a key part of it. So this recording will be there to guide them. And I hope more than anything, this session inspires more students to take an impact lens as they build out things on the internet. And with that, I'd like to just thank everyone for joining in for today's session. We have a lot more interesting sessions planned through the next week, so keep joining in. And I hope you are able to take time this summer to tinker and try something new. So, yeah, with that, thank you everyone, and I'll see you all again soon.
Thank you so much.